Welcome back to Empowered and Out. I am your host, Jonathan. Today we're diving into the intersection of rest, resilience, and reimagining leadership. My guest is Passion Rutledge. Passion Rutledge, the Finance and Operations Director at the National Farm to School Network. Passion helps lead national efforts to connect children with local food and to support equitable food systems across the country. But her story goes far beyond her career. She and her wife are raising 3 children in Arkansas, creating a vibrant queer family in the South. She's also a writer who explores themes of healing, identity, and collective liberation. In our conversation today, we'll talk about the transformative power of sabbaticals, the beauty and challenges of raising a queer family in the South, and why community is essential for both personal growth and systemic change. We'll also hear about the upcoming 10th National Farm to Cafeteria Conference in Albuquerque this December, a gathering of nearly 2,000 leaders reimagining how food, equity, and justice intersect. So if you're a longtime listener or tuning in for the first time, I am so glad you're here. And Passion, welcome to Empowered and Out. I'm so glad that you are here.
Hi, thank you. That was such a great introduction. You did so good. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So let's talk about sabbatical.
Yeah.
And let's start with you made the decision to take a sabbatical. What led you to step away from work and what did that space unlock for you?
Yes, I did. I did do that. And it was late 2016 and early 2017, just after Trump won the first election and took office. So I was working at a nonprofit that feared it might not survive, a lot like nonprofits today. And my personal life at that same exact time felt pretty fragile as well. I was newly married, new homeowner, but my husband and I at the time were barely speaking. On my 28th birthday, it just hit me kind of hard. I was living a life that didn't feel like my own. So I really needed to reclaim space for myself. I needed to rest, evaluate. I needed to understand like what kind of life I actually wanted to have. So I knew I didn't want this one, but what kind of life did I want? I tried looking for jobs. I didn't have any energy for that. I felt pulled to something completely different. I wanted to travel. I wanted to travel. I wanted to teach abroad or maybe even do some farming. So I ended up on a solo retreat that was supposed to be a couples retreat in Sedona. And I received clear guidance to go to Hawaii. And so soon after I got back from that, the nonprofit I worked for, they closed down. I moved to Hawaii as a woofer. That's the Worldwide Organization of Organic Farming. And I moved to a flower farm. People warned me about taking a break in my career at that point, but honestly, the break changed everything. I came back with clarity, I came back with purpose, and I knew what my values were, and that's what I needed.
Nice. And, speaking of clarity and purpose, that is so important to know. To me, obviously, being a career coach, that's one of the things I help with clients is getting that clarity and purpose. And I love that even though you had to take some time away, but due to obviously the circumstances that were happening at the time, it probably was the best for you to do that. And I love that you came back with that, clarity, the purpose, the determination to, move forward. So, yeah, can you share what gave you that vision and healing and how that you see your life or your leadership like moving forward?
Yeah. I think what I really realized was how important it was, like self-determination, working on myself, working on my inner world, and then a place for my inner world and my inner values to match my external world and my external values. Like that's really what I wanted to do. In the autistic community and the neurodivergent community, we call it masking. So there was a lot of masking that I was doing, and I needed to unmask because my masking wore me out and it tore me down. And I knew that I needed to live a different way, to lead a different way, to have a different type of job in order to survive, honestly, to make it. Like I felt on the edge of that. So that's everything to me, and that's my everyday now. I try to infuse the things that I love into everything because that is how I get through. That's how I get through.
That's awesome. So, You and your wife are raising 3 daughters in Arkansas. What has it been like to build a queer family in the South?
Yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey. So I moved my family from Baltimore to Little Rock in the middle of the pandemic, 2021. That decision was a direct result of my experience farming in Hawaii. I realized I valued a slower pace of life than the hustle and bustle of the DC metropolitan area. That's where I grew up. And I needed a lot less stimulation in a lot of ways. And living in Little Rock, our job as parents is to create safety, belonging, self esteem for our daughters. That's really important because we know the environment here isn't necessarily the best for that. We've been provided a lot of opportunities here, but not so much that. So we provide that as parents, and we model love, we model acceptance, but also that importance that I was talking about earlier of working on yourself, self
Mhm.
determination. We talk openly and directly with our daughters about almost anything. I'm so grateful that my daughters talk to me. I have teenagers, so that can be a challenge, but I want them to feel like they can be their whole selves at home because I know what that's like when you can't be your whole self.
Mhm. So, where do you find your joy and visibility in that journey, especially in a region with such complex histories around race, gender, and sexuality?
That's such a great question, and it's honestly layered. I think that my spiritual beliefs and my spiritual background kind of ground me there because what I try to do is attract people and situations that are going to affirm us as much as possible, right? Because there's plenty that won't affirm us. So
Mhm.
I spend time, affirmations in the morning, time with myself, prayers to really attract the more positive aspects of living here. I stay outside a lot. We go outside. Arkansas is a beautiful state in that way. So I take them on hikes. We, eat at farmers markets. We eat local food. We try to do that as much as possible. It's like I try to make up for some of the negative things about living here by emphasizing the really, really positive parts about living here and just fully embracing that and enjoying that. And then I'm able to find people who are like more like minded and more kind. And like by doing those kinds of things, the things that really bring me joy, that helps.
Yeah.
If you're kind of down in the dumps, if you're feeling really bad, then you might just kind of continue to bring more and more of that to you.
Nice. And I have to agree, yes, you do live in a very beautiful state. I've been in Arkansas many times. And I mean, I'm a little biased. I think Colorado's a little bit more beautiful, but it is definitely a beautiful place. And it's great that you're showing the beauty and the positivity surrounding you just based on, like I said, just the chaos of how
Mhm.
race, gender, and sexuality can be so attacked
Mhm.
in especially where you live. I'm not
And
saying that that
especially right
doesn't
now.
happen here,
Yeah,
but it definitely you are in the South and it definitely is a little bit more prevalent in those areas.
for sure.
So you've shared that being Black, queer, and neurodivergent has shaped your leadership voice. How do those identities show up in your role as a leader?
Yeah. One of the things that I make sure that I want to say is that for the majority of my career and probably even like, as a child, as a student, as a young person, I've been highly visible. I'm often one of the only Black women or one of the few queer people or maybe the only divergent person in the room. Like whatever groups that I'm in, I end up highly visible. Even if that is a group full of Black queer women, I still have these other identifiers that separate and make me different. So my challenge has been like loving myself, understanding myself, and then feeling confident enough to like show up fully as who I am. It's been a struggle, but the more that I do that, I'm seeing, especially right now in my career, the more success it's bringing me. And I'm very thankful for that. Like, almost like I can see where my insecurity impacted my career trajectory. Like,
Mhm.
it's direct correlation. So, now I'm in this place where I'm embracing the transparency, I'm embracing the directness, and I'm speaking about my lived experiences and I'm advocating for others. So, those my identities aren't barriers. They can be, but they can also be assets. It's kind of up to us sometimes to be able to choose. Of course, there's some circumstances that are gonna be what they are with race
Mhm.
and homophobia and all of that. But I really feel like I've been led because of my experiences to a place of empathy. So, like, I bring empathy into things and courage. You got to have courage to be different. You got to have courage to not be like the status quo. So I've had to walk in these highly visible spaces with courage. And anybody else in those situations, they have to have courage too, because if you don't, the world will just tell you that you don't belong here.
That is very true. I feel you said it perfectly. Courage is huge. And I think a lot of times we don't show that courage and have that courage because of, in your instance, being queer, being a Black woman, being in the South. Like, you have so many ticks against you, very possibly, but you have shown up. You're like, no, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm going to be. And I think that authenticity is huge. And especially in leading in a leadership role and having a voice, because that shares with all those others in the community. Oh, wow, I can be just like Passion. I can actually do that because she is doing this. That's awesome. Okay, how do I do that? How can I be like that? And I think, especially in the time that we are right now and living in, our voices really, really matter. And I think it's very, very important to show up and to be courageous and to speak up. It's honestly a huge reason of why this podcast even exists, because I was done on hearing just the very few months after, Trump took office for a second time. I was like, no, we're done. We're creating, I'm going to bring these voices. I'm going to bring who I can get onto this platform to share and to get the voices out there, so people not here just in the United States, but around the world can say, we're not stopping. We're standing up. We're going to be here. And I feel that we're getting the support internationally, because I've been fortunate, as you know, listening to this podcast, I have an international voice. Like, there are people that are listening. And I think that is even more important, because we're getting not just us locally, but also internationally. So, what lessons about belonging have you learned that you wish others in leadership would embrace more fully?
Oh my goodness. What a great question. That's such a great question. I think that I would say that belonging what I've learned is that belonging is a feeling first and foremost. Meaning, and what that means to me is that, like, we can create the conditions in an organization or a group or a school for belonging. But to be honest, what really keeps people from feeling like they belong is a feeling, is their own connection to belonging, their own connection to communities, their own connection to life, to earth. And that's a process. And I think that that's a process that a lot of people don't, they can kind of approach belonging in a like a textbook kind of way, like, let's put these things in place and then everyone will feel like they belong. But there's histories,
Mhm.
America in particular has a very long history with belonging. And so somebody putting everything in place doesn't equal automatic belonging. And you really have to take the opportunity to have those conversations with people on a deeper human to human interaction level. Like, sit down and talk to me. Like, we're talking right now. We're talking and our voices are, amplifying to this international audience that you're talking about. And this conversation itself can have ripple effects because you're actually dealing with me on a personal level and I'm talking to you on a personal level where you can hear all the different things that came in the way of the belonging. It's not a straight line. It's not a set of values that you put in bullet points and then you enact and then people are okay. It doesn't work like that. People have
Mhm.
real feelings about not belonging, and you got to look at those. You have to look at them and address them. And I think that I did that even within myself. I felt like I wasn't going to belong no matter who would have pulled me into a group. I would have separated myself because of how I felt inside, and I needed to address that. I needed to sit in a room alone and talk about that and think about that before I wanted to preach or teach or anything about belonging to anyone. I had to feel like I belonged. So there's a way that I feel like people have to make their belonging You have to make your belonging, and that's a part of the process. Someone else can give belonging, but you have to come and do your part too. You have to meet them there. And you meet them there by embodying it yourself with yourself. Belong to you first. So, that's what I would say to others.
I love that. Belong to yourself first. I love that. And you're right, a sense of belonging is huge. That goes across the board. I mean,
Right.
not just even in the queer community, but I would say belonging in the queer community is even more impactful. It's more, I wouldn't say impactful. It is impactful, but it's more important for us
Mhm.
because we need to feel that sense of belonging. Because if we don't, who can we reach out to? Who can we get
Exactly.
assistance from? Who can we get empathy from, help, direction. And I think that belonging, focusing, making sure you're focusing on yourself and the belonging and in understanding yourself is going to help you to be more open to belonging with others in and around the community
Exactly.
and locally and at large. So
Yeah.
awesome.
I've just seen so
So
many people. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Definitely go ahead.
I've just seen so many people, like, when they do come with help and they're ready to help, they're on fire to help others, and then the community receiving the help is just is hesitant and challenged. And I'm like, just being ready and willing to give is not the whole story. They also
Mhm.
have to be ready to receive that help, and that usually comes from some type of internal process.
I would agree. So let's talk about food, farming, and purpose. Your career is rooted in food and farming. Was there a moment when you realized that this work was more than just a job, that it was actually connected to your deeper purpose?
Yes, yes, and yes. Many moments, many yes. But I would say in one way I want to acknowledge that, like, my entry into food systems wasn't glamorous. Like, living in Hawaii itself is glamorous, but I want to honor all the farm workers out here who are doing this hard work. It's not glamorous. It's hard work. I was getting up at 7 every morning and working pretty hard. Hot days, I was doing work trade for housing and meals. I made very little money. It's hard work and low pay. But I remember just being out there. I was in the flower fields. I used to work with pink gingers, called them Kimmy gingers. And the flowers, they grow really tall. They grow taller than me. So I'm out there in the field, like, surrounded by these beautiful pink ginger flowers. And I just felt deeply connected to myself, the earth, and the beauty of everything. And I looked, in theory, I looked a mess. I got on, shorts, sweats, not the life that I was living in DC. It's just, I wanna be clear, like, it was no glamorous clothes, no, my nails weren't done, none of that. Just sweat, mud, and beauty. And I was able to find the beauty there in those quiet moments in the flower fields. I was able to find so much, and I realized that maybe my value system even had been a little off from before, because I had essentially less than I had ever had, but I had this deeper calling. And over time, like, it really became clear to me that farming wasn't just about food, it's not about crops. It's just a connection to a simpler, more cyclic way of life, like, where I really believe that farming healed me, and I imagine that it could do that for a lot of other people as well. And that it had historically done that for many people before now. So I just felt like communities could benefit from the same kind of experience that I had, and that this whole new realm of food farming, it was my purpose. It's the place where I can talk about justice, I can talk about sustainability, care, all those things that I was kind of talking about before. There's plenty of room for that. And when you're talking about food systems, when you're talking about farmers and farm workers, like I just said, and a lot going on right now with farm workers. And so I felt grounded in my work, rooted in my work, if you will, like, way beyond a paycheck.
Nice pun there. I like that. So let's build on that. So you talked about it a little bit. So how do you see food and community as pathways for healing and liberation?
Yeah, another great question. So we all eat. We all
Yeah.
eat. And there's a way that food is the great equalizer. And something that I found potentially very interesting is that no matter kind of like what your socioeconomic background or status is in the US, we're all eating poorly and we're all having the same results. So when I hear that, when I think about that, it really makes me feel like this is one of those things, food and food systems that would really benefit from all of us coming together around it because we have a mutual interest. We have a mutual interest in our planet and in sustaining our planet and being able to sustain our own individual bodies. This matters for each of us as individuals as much as it matters collectively as groups. So,
Mhm.
no one's ever going to all be for everything, but eating is a pretty common, most
Yeah.
eating's pretty common. And so there's a place here where there's a lot of people who don't know that maybe they need to be involved in this or that this is something worth caring about. There's a lot of people who just don't know, but I feel like have some type of care or attachment because it's connected to what's on their plate every day.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we have to eat. I mean, we can't exist as, and it's not just even just as humans.
Right.
Animals have to eat to
Right.
survive. So,
Right. Your dog
and
has to eat too. Yes.
yeah, I mean, even if we are eating those animals, we still have to, it's a cyclical process. Like we have to be able to eat. And I love, you mentioned it earlier, but I love that you've instilled like trying to eat locally and eating, because it's so important.
Yes.
Well, it's also it's much healthier for us because I was always taught, I don't know if you were, I know when I was younger, I was taught the best thing to do if you go into a grocery store is you shop from the outside.
Mm,
Everything fresh or, more, I wouldn't say necessarily even local, but everything that's probably grown
mhm.
is on the outside.
Yes.
And then on the inside is everything that is processed. That's actually not good for us. Excuse me. And I I still try to take that to heart. It
Yeah.
is hard. We have our cravings. There are certain things that aren't going to be on that outside. But I think that when we can really instill the freshness, the local, and especially right now with supporting those farmers, because there's a lot of craziness going on right now and it's really hurting the farmers and getting those crops, taken care of, getting them to us. And so the more that we purchase, the more that we support is going to be, it's very, very important. So you've emphasized the power of community and networks. Why do you believe shared learning spaces like conferences are so essential right now?
Yeah. In food systems work, but really in any work, no single organization can solve all the problems that we face, right? Like, and if the world's problems are anything like, problems in a marriage, they might not even be solvable in a sense. Not all the problems that we face are solvable. They're not all meant to be solved. But I believe it's important to create environments where we can learn from each other. We can learn from the attempts that we make that worked, that don't work. We need that time to see ourselves, to see what solutions we're putting forward, to see ourselves reflected, and then build collective strategies. So, conferences and networks, they can be used in one sense where we don't really actually use them as an opportunity to connect. But I've seen, good, impactful, intentional conferences be used for exactly that, where an idea in one state like Arkansas can spark something in California, and that information share across the networks and across the states helps move policy even because one state can talk to another state about how they did something and then we see change. We get to see how a local solution that works for one particular community can get scaled nationally or for other communities at least. So I really believe that shared learning spaces accelerate change, especially when that's the intention behind them. And it creates movements versus all of us working in our little bubbles or our little silos. So conferences, networking, community, they're just reminders that we're not alone in this. And I think that we need that. We need it.
Well, and I think it's so unique and, to put it just kind of, so cool that we can have these conferences to come together. But it's fascinating that let's just go back 100, 200 years. There wasn't the ability to collaborate and get to these collective, taking these collective actions to be able to find out, okay, well, I'm in Arkansas. Okay, what's Kansas doing to do this? What's Oklahoma doing? You didn't have that ability to do that. And now you have this power to be able to come together in probably a much easier way. And so, as you look ahead to the 10th National Farm to Cafeteria Conference this December, what excites you most about bringing nearly 2,000 leaders together?
I love information. I love information. I love that I'm basically planning a party that I would like to go to and being able to interact with information in a lot of different ways. And so, sometimes you hear information and people think just like slides, but it's not just slides, right? It's like the knowledge and information that you get from talking to people, the knowledge and information that you get from seeing art, from experiencing a new culture, from just, America is this very beautiful country, but just going from city to city is a very different experience. And so how they're living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where this year's conference is, and what they're experiencing in Albuquerque is a little different than what they're experiencing here in Little Rock or Colorado, but then there's pieces of it that are all the same. And so I like being able to take a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different backgrounds around a shared identity and shared mission and see what happens, see what comes from that. Like, it's an opportunity for us to see our diversity in play, right? Like, here's all the different ways that we eat. Here's all the different ways that we're impacted by food. Here's all the different ways that we feel like we can bring food to our communities, feed our kids in the future. I just really love that. I always have. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia because they were calling it Diversity University. It's nothing better to me than hearing from all these different communities and learning from all these different kinds of people. Something else I've been really excited about is that the National Farm to School Network has been getting international attention, just like you were talking about with your show. So there's a lot more people like emailing me from Africa, and
Wow,
that's
that's
amazing. Like
awesome.
you were
Yeah.
saying about the internet, like this great convener, it brings us all together, and I love this idea that I can share information with other countries. Canada comes to our event. All of the territories come to our event. So it's not just, traditional US, even though there's so much diversity here in the US, but then there's also all this global diversity as well. And to be able to hear from all of that, all those people, that's just a blessing. To me, it's I feel a lot of gratitude about that.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on this. I'm going completely off script. You're welcome, listeners and viewers. But I want you to really, I can see your excitement in this. This is awesome. And I want you to share just a little bit more. Like, what was the whole purpose of starting like the National Farm to Cafeteria Conference, and I can understand probably what keeps it going, but why do you think it keeps going? Why do you think it's just, so important to keep having this?
Yeah. I think in the simplest way, National Farm to School Network and the conference itself came out of this idea that we wanted to help communities. And the ways to do that was through schools and institutional cafeterias, not just
Uh-huh.
schools, but schools being a large part of what the National Farm to School Network does in particular. And what we found was that farm to school, this whole movement, it really impacted communities on a lot of different layers that were bringing some really positive results. The local farmers were making more money and they had more customers because they were able to connect with the school systems. And then the school systems, of course, were able to feed their kids, our kids, better. They were able to match up with those kind of natural cycles of the earth and the planet that we were talking about. And so now you're talking sustainability as well. You're talking about climate. And so there's this small thing where you're like, yeah, there's a farmer who sells peaches and now he's going to sell his peaches to the school. That seems like a small simple thing, but the way that it ripples across communities is vast. And so that's what gets me so excited. That's what the conference was about. You can come to this place, farmers can come, educators come, political leaders come. And so all these different pathways convene in one place because it also requires legislation to be passed. There's a lot going on. A lot of people are still waiting for the farm bill to happen and to see where the farm bill is going to go. And so there's legislation tied to this as well. And to be able to get all of those people in the same room at the same time, to be able to actually make decisions, that is where we saw the most change and growth happening. So that is why we do the conference. That's why we did it back then. And that's why it continues to move forward, because we're this unique convener bringing the people and the government together, which is how a democracy is meant to be, run in essence, where we've made the process more democratic. Of course, there's been ups and downs with that. There's been our organization itself has gone through a change. There's been lots of racism and inequity, even embedded in the food system. So that those have all been barriers. I don't want to discount that or act like that didn't happen. It did happen, but we're in an era now where we can see directly how one school getting peaches from a farmer has ripple effects across the food system and can change laws and therefore change communities. I'm gonna forever be excited about that.
That's awesome. You've now made me really wonder because one of the absolute favorite of my crops here in Colorado is our peaches, the Palisade peaches over in
Nice.
Palisade, Colorado. They're hands down the best peaches I've ever had in my life. And I always try to do something with them every single year, either bake with them or just flat out just eat them. But I really hope if anyone from Colorado is listening, like I really hope that they are integrating these into the schools. Because first off, it's healthy for you. It's good for you. But like we also have corn. We have some other, crops that are grown here locally that I think that's really important. And I love that it's a great coming together. It's a great connection to bring all of these different, like you said, political leaders, like educators, to be able to come together to see farmers, the impact and how it can be, very impactful. And let's be real, there's definitely some schools locally and across the country, I'm sure that this might be the only meals that some of these children are getting.
Exactly.
And the better, the more, really, the healthier we make some of these meals, the better for them as well as in growth in our bodies. Because let's be honest, our school lunches when we were younger were not the healthiest.
They weren't. They were not nutritious.
No.
But we've really moved away from cooking altogether. And I don't know how many people know that, but like a lot of these schools, they don't actually have kitchen equipment. They don't have people who know how to cook at all. And that's kind of scary to think about, that they're not even cooking anymore. So everything is getting warmed up. Everything is going in the microwave or coming out of a package. That's some kids' reality. And like you said, and then that's their only meal. People are eating out of packages all day long.
Wow. Wow. Well, listeners, we're going to talk a little bit more about the conference, but we're going to move on. So, your personal life and professional life feel deeply woven together. How do you balance or maybe even integrate equity work, career leadership, and raising a family?
I integrate. I think, balance is a hard thing to achieve unless you're talking about long-term balance. I think things do balance out over long term, but sometimes just on a day-to-day basis, I'm like, this day might just have to be dedicated to this. And that's that's what it is. But I think when we talk about words like fairness and we talk about words like equity, which, they have their meaning on the piece of paper, but really what we're talking about is treating people well.
Hmm.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And so for me, treating people well isn't a job description. That's a value. I'm gonna take that value into my family and my career and into anything I do, into my volunteer work. It's just how I live. And so to me, that means, I guess, that the lines between career and family, they're always kind of blurred. But I like it that way because I intentionally built my life this way, because it means that I'm living my values in all aspects. I do want my values to be in all aspects of the way that I'm living. So that might not work for everybody, but it does work for me. And I think, as a parent, my responsibility is kind of to show my kids that equity isn't just like a soundbite. It's not abstract. Treating people well is something that you can embody in all of your choices, in your career choices,
Mhm.
and your family choices, and your food choices. You can really take this with you all in everything you do. So I bring my family into the work, whether it's taking them to the conferences with me, talking about justice around the dinner table, modeling rest, because I don't want my daughters, especially young Black girls, to feel like they need to take everything on their shoulders and on their back. So I model rest. I'm a big boundary person. I love boundaries. And so, I bring my lived family reality into my professional spaces so that my leadership isn't disconnected from the rest of my life. I don't want to live a disconnected life anymore. And I made a lot of changes in my life so that I didn't have to live it that way. And I think the integration of everything makes me a more centered person and a better parent, like a more intentional parent is maybe the best way to say that. And I feel like my job is to actually show more than tell my kids. Like, let me show them so I'm not just preaching to them. And then I also think that my colleagues get to see that I'm not sacrificing my family. And so maybe that encourages other people too to include their family more. I don't know. But I also work at a great place that is very accepting of family. So I appreciate that as well, because I do know what it's like to work in a place where that isn't the case. And I know how hard that can be for moms and parents to integrate the two. But
Mhm.
I know that working remotely has also helped me a lot. So it's just like I'm at an integrated place, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Well, you made a really good point is that you need to showing that you're taking the action to integrate, between work and, your personal life, your family, your parenting is huge. And I think one of the things we have to do there's a lot of things, and I'm sure you've seen this, there's a lot of things that politicians say, oh, we're going to do this, or we're going to make these changes. We'll take the action, show us. You're just below the show me state of Missouri. And a lot of times, I mean, I lived on the Kansas side because I grew up in Kansas, but in the Kansas City area. So I've kind of, even though I didn't grow up in Missouri, it was kind of like, all right, well, show me, show it,
Yes.
show this action that you claim that you're going to do, show that you want to make a difference. Because if you're not, I'm moving on from you. I'm not going to. And I
Yes.
think it also works with work, with businesses, and organizations. If they're going to say, oh, we're going to make this change, and they just keep talking about and talking about and talking about and never show that they're actually taking the action to do
Yeah.
it, people aren't probably going to support, those people anymore. And that works even for farmers. If the farmers say, hey, we're going to take this, we're going to start using these crops to integrate them into the school system, into the school cafeterias. Okay, great. But they never really push forward with it. Why?
Yeah.
And I know there's red tape and I know there's processes that have to happen. But if they're not always coming to the table to want to make the changes, if you're not going to show it and taking the action, makes it a lot harder,
Yeah.
overall for people.
Then you lose
So,
credibility.
yes, exactly. So you kind of hinted on this, but I'm going to ask a little bit more on this. Do you think separation between work and personal life, number one, is even possible? Or is it or is integration actually the key?
I would say that I know it's possible. Yeah, I know it's possible to separate because I've also been that person who kept very strict boundaries. I didn't tell people about really my life at all. I would kind of show up to work and want to just do my job and go home. But what I learned from
I think
that.
we've all been there, actually.
So, like, I know you can do it. I think for me personally, it ended up putting like a wall up, and like I said kind of earlier, it made it so that I could only grow but so far in my career because I wasn't doing one of the major things that you need to do, which is like build relationships with people, right? So like if I'm
Mhm.
not sharing myself at all, then people don't feel connected to me as a person and they don't really want to hear what I have to say. It's all kind of a domino effect. So I think that integration is the place that can make you the happiest or bring the most joy and fulfillment to your life and career. But you can definitely do it any other way. You can say, I'm coming here to get my paycheck and, forget the rest of y'all Monday through Friday, if that is what works for you. But I know for me, that thinking like that stopped me and I wanted to do more. And when you want to do more, it requires more. And I think being where I'm at right now required more of me. and I had to, well, I didn't have to, but I wanted to give more so that I could get more.
Well, and I think that it's nice to think that yes, you can separate work and personal life, but I think that if you, and this is pun intended, if you have a passion about something or you have a purpose, you want to do something, let's say you're doing something on the side and you want to, but it is part of your personal life,
Yes.
but you want to bring it into the workplace. If you've put up that wall, that's never going to happen.
Exactly.
It's, I mean, for me, for instance, I mean, granted, I work for myself, but I am
Right.
in a choir and I love to share about, our concerts coming up and what we do. Well, if I never wanted to share personal things in the workplace, that can hinder, number one, us getting a bigger audience as a chorus for our
Yeah.
concerts. But it also, I feel like you're going to feel that disconnect a little bit. You're never going to feel, because who knows? I mean, I can tell you personally, we're growing our choir right now. We're trying to get it to a certain level. Well, if I'm never sharing anything in the workplace and that's the only other people I'm surrounding myself with outside of, my personal life and friends, then it's never going to happen.
Exactly.
And that can work, but I'm sure, I believe integration, I kind of feel is key. Yes, you can have that separation, but I feel that for me personally, I believe you can have it, but you have to think, how much of that separation do you want?
Exactly.
Because it can really, and I think it can also affect your mental health as well. Because granted, let's be real, if we have a struggling work environment and you really are coming in just for the paycheck, which has happened, I think it's happened to a lot of us. I think it's kind of a little bit part of life. I think a little bit as we keep going forward in life now and just the way society is, we can potentially integrate both, but being a part of, like you and I, being a part of the queer community, that also can be a struggle. And that's why separation happens a lot, is because people don't want to bring it up. But also, it's that leading with authenticity. That's where, if you can't truly be your authentic self, which I get it 100%, it depends on, a lot of times it depends on
Exactly.
who you work for, what you do, to being able to be authentic. But the separation, I think, is sometimes a little dangerous because it can hurt you. It's going to hurt you mentally
Yeah.
more than you think. And I think integration, I love how you integrate and you try to do it the best you can, because I think that you're right. It shows other people, hey, if Passion's doing it, then maybe I can do it as well.
Right.
And I think that when we see those examples, or they can ask, how do you do this? How do
Right.
you actually integrate this? I don't understand. I'm really struggling, with this with my child or whatever. And that's also a great way to have a conversation.
Mhm.
You're a parent. That can bring parents together.
It does.
Oh my gosh, my daughter, oh my gosh, I mean, like you said, you have teenagers and luckily you get to have these conversations.
Right.
Let's be real. Teenagers aren't always the most communicative.
Exactly.
So to have that and then be able to have that ability to bring that out, with a coworker, that's huge, because you might get some advice. Not that I don't want, not that I'm saying you can't get advice from a podcast or a new show or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's almost even better to get it from someone personally.
Yeah. Sometimes for
So, alongside your leadership, you're also a writer exploring themes of healing, identity, and liberation. So, how does writing support or expand your leadership journey?
Yeah. I love that earlier when you were talking, you brought up mental health. And I feel like for me, writing has long time served my mental health. And leadership can be very highly visible and external, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. But my writing, that's a deeply internal space. And I've brought writing with me no matter what I've done. So I studied journalism and psychology in college. And my thought behind that was like, I can always write, I can write about anything. And that truly has been the case. So, like, whether I've worked in STEM, I've done a lot of different jobs too. So I've had a lot of different jobs, like, worked in a lot of different industries, but the writing is always an anchor no matter where I am. And I needed it personally, just to process like my healing, my trauma, my questions about identity. It's a nice safe space to explore, queer identity, because that can be its own thing that it's nice to process with a person like you were talking about, but it can also you might also sometimes need that time to process with yourself.
Mhm.
I think that that's what the writing is for me. I write about grief, queerness, race, spirituality, sexuality, liberation. I love fiction. So writing just lets my mind just do whatever it wants to do. It's a free place. I can explore ideas that other people don't want to talk about. I can write about them as much as I want. And I think it expands my leadership ultimately because it helps provide me a deeper self awareness. It keeps me honest, it keeps me accountable, and it just nourishes that creativity too. I feel very happy right now and gracious to be in a place where I can be creative at work. Lots of different reasons why sometimes creativity can be squashed at work
Mhm.
or just squash in a period of your life period, because sometimes having kids can do that too. Like it's just so much to do that you don't feel like you have time to write or be creative or in color think in color, to imagine, to dream. And that's really what writing does. So it supports me as a leader, but then it also just supports me personally, and it'll always be there for me. I keep my journals. I love my journals, and they're like prized possessions for me because they have walked me through almost everything.
So, is there a piece of writing or reflection that you've done recently that feels especially alive or important to you right now?
I think so. I wasn't gonna even talk about that here, but you asked. I am working on a piece of fiction. And so this would be my first like full novel. And it really explores these themes of gender identity. And just also I think that I play around with kind of autistic identity, but not in a way that I'm saying that explicitly. So I don't know if everyone would have that experience, but I'm really taking the time to write about my experience so that people understand that the experiences that I was having, they really did look different and they really did feel different, but I want to share that with you. So it kind of like the writing is just another thing that brings everything together, like we've been talking about, because it's really a journey of me sharing myself. I think that for a long time, I was a very quiet person. People didn't know what all was going on in my mind and they assumed a lot and they were wrong. And so now I'm kind of taking control of that and talking and writing and sharing, and this fiction is that. It's me sharing, it's me talking, it's me opening up. I was a very quiet child and I was a very quiet person for a very long time. So I'm hoping that there's people who are like, oh, this is what she was keeping in there.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on taking that path, like, to do that. That's really
Thank you. Thank you. I know when we talked, you talked a lot about the authors who were coming on your show and you really giving space for them. So I thought about it, but I was like, well, I'm so still in the thick of the process that, I'm not there yet. I don't have an actual book to promote, but I am working on it and enjoying working on it. It's been really fun.
well, you've put it out there, so, we're gonna have to have you back on to chat about
Yes.
it because, I mean, I am excited. Like, every single person I've had on that's had either music or a book or whatever it might be, it's been really inspiring, and it's been really fun to read and
Yeah.
to hear the creativity and the awesomeness of everyone that I've had on so far. Like, it's so cool to see everyone what they're doing and what
Yes.
they're doing that makes them happy, that gives them joy and life and everything that they do. So,
I so appreciate you in this moment. It's just like I feel like what you're doing is a little bit of a revolution right now, like a joy revolution. And I know sometimes people think that resistance is like getting outside with a protest sign, but there's also a resistance that comes out of just living your life the way you would like to live it intentionally and with joy. and you spreading that message far and wide. I love that. I love that, like, your podcast would be part of America's legacy, despite some of the, we get the news, and maybe the news that goes out about our country right now isn't so great. But we know, and we have this moment. Like, we have this
Yes.
moment where we can talk and have these conversations, and we know that, like, a part of the American dream is still very much alive. And we get to have that together. And I so appreciate you for that and what you're doing for this, for people, for people.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. So before I let you go, I have some rapid fire questions for you. I warned you about this, but also since you listen to my podcast, you would know that I do this with every listener or every guest that I have on. I hope the listeners are having fun and trying to answer some of these questions, even if it happens to relate to them as well. But excuse me. So, when you went on sabbatical, if your sabbatical had a theme song, what would it be?
The first thing that came to me was a Destiny's Child, I'm a Survivor.
I mean, I kind of think that works just
Yeah.
based on, how you described it and the timing of everything that was happening at the time. So, I would agree with that. And that it's a great song. So, all right. So, what's the most Arkansas thing about your family's daily life?
We have an Arkansas cutting board. So every time we chop our vegetables and we chop our vegetables, we're chopping up food for dinner. It's all on our Arkansas cutting board that we bought from Branson, Missouri,
Nice.
where is the first time I had learned about, like, Branson being a great place for vacation was definitely from all the local people here. That's our little Arkansas touch.
Nice. So, if you had to describe your leadership style as a food, what would it be and why?
I would say that my food would probably be something like a grapefruit. Like, I think a grapefruit is not your typical fruit, so it maybe isn't like the first fruit that you think about, and then it's like an acquired taste. So everyone is not into grapefruit, but the great people who love grapefruit, they really love grapefruit. And then it's got like a ton of great benefits. It's really a great citrus fruit, but it's one of the lesser known ones, so I'd go with a grapefruit.
Awesome. All right. And finally, what's one quirky family tradition in your household that always makes you smile?
Probably, like, at the beginning of the school year, we like to go around and visit a lot of the, like, back to school events, back to school drives. Like, we make a map of all the ones that are happening around the city, and then we kind of bounce from, like, party to party as a family and, eat the free food and the free snacks and just enjoy people, lots of different kinds of people, because we go to lots of different ones. And I don't know why we started doing that a couple of years ago. I really think it started out of, like, need. Like, I needed school supplies and I didn't have the money for them. And so we would, do it from that angle because I could get multiple backpacks for my kids and I could get my kids what they needed. But then it just turned into, like, a fun thing that we like to do. So they never really knew that it was about need. It didn't feel like that. It just became like a thing that we do, like, as a family, to just kind of kick off the school year.
That's awesome. So, Passion, we've covered sabbaticals, healing, raising a family, and the power of community. If you could leave listeners and viewers now with one piece of guidance for living authentically and sustainably, what would it be?
Living authentically and sustainably is about trusting yourself, trusting how you feel. A lot of people try to, in this world that we live in, feelings are not always emphasized, and that we're not always told that they are important. But a lot of times, your feelings and your heart are whispers of the deeper part of you,
Hmm.
the inside part of you, the notebook part of you, the diary part of you. And if you really want to let that out, then you have to listen to it. You have to listen to it. You have to give space for it. You have to give it a voice. And I know for me, that led listening to that voice, that little tiny voice, it got louder and it got louder. That led to everything else in my life. And I would really encourage people to listen to that.
Awesome. Well, Passion, thank you for sharing your journey with us, your wisdom about rest, leadership, family and equity is such a gift.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, for everyone listening, if you've been inspired by this conversation, you can connect with Passion on LinkedIn. You can also learn more about the 10th National Farm to Cafeteria Conference happening December 1st through the 4th in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Tickets, sponsorships, and exhibitor opportunities are open now at farmtoschool.org/conference. And all that information will be in the show notes. And any single social media post that we put out about this episode will have all that information in there as well. But I want to ask you to please rate, review, and share this episode with a friend who needs to hear it. And of course, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Empowered and Out. So until next time, stay empowered, stay out, and keep nourishing your life, your work, and your community with the authenticity and joy that only you can bring.